Carlos Nelson with What's Up Kansas City and Cascade Media Group. And today we're featuring another one of our urban professionals. Who do we have here?
This is Seft, Seft Hunter.
Hey, Seth, you know the drill. Let's go to kindergarten, baby boy. Run it down.
Yeah, Carlos. So I've been in Kansas City for about 10 years. But the path to Kansas City for me came through Jamaica. My father came to the United States in the 70s as a migrant worker. He came to pick southern crops, so like oranges and pecans and things like that. My dad got amnesty in the 1980s, but before that, he was undocumented here in the States for about a decade. And what that means for us, or what that meant for him, was that, I mean, he would work sometimes.
For us.
Yeah, what it means for us, absolutely, was that he would work sometimes months and wouldn't get paid. He was truly invisible in this country in every sense of the word, right? He had no rights at that time, no recourse to petition for rights. But fast forwarding just a little bit, in the 1980s, he got amnesty through President Reagan's amnesty program. The last time in this country that we had a sane immigration policy. Fast forward even a little bit after that, in 1989, I got the opportunity to come to the United States on a green card.
Excuse me, people say I always interrupt. I had to interrupt while my mind is on it. I'd be losing my mind. All right. So you actually weren't born in the United States.
I was not.
All right, that's what I want to get. All right. So what are your memories? Because we went from kindergarten. I was wondering, how did we get on that? But now the thread is showing. Do you have memories of your country?
Yeah, so I was born in Jamaica. Jamaica, as many of us know, is one of the larger Caribbean countries, right? Obviously, we're smack dab in the middle of the Caribbean. I came to the States in the 80s, the late 1980s, so 1989.
How old were you?
I was roughly like about 8 or 9 years old.
All right.
So old enough to have memories
of your country. All right.
Yeah, I was old enough to still have memories of being in Jamaica, and basically landed in Baltimore and lived in Martinsburg, West Virginia. If you can imagine that, I was in Martinsburg, West Virginia for most of my childhood.
Know exactly where it's at. My freshman year, I went to Petersburg down there at Virginia State.
Yeah, so Martinsburg is a small little town. It's in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. It's in between Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Maryland. It's roughly about 90 minutes from Washington, D.C. And so, incidentally, there are a number of folks who live in Martinsburg, West Virginia.
Work in D.C. That Baltimore-Washington Turnpike be burning up, baby.
Yeah. So fast forward even a little bit beyond that, I went to college in West Virginia. But before I went to West Virginia, I joined the military. I was in the Air Force for a number of years. Did that and then went to West Virginia and did my bachelor's degree and master's degree there. And then
what? Tell the people you running too quick, baby boy. Yeah. you jumped from kindergarten right on into college. West Virginia, home of the legendary logo, Jerry West.
Yes, right.
Because we have the sports channel, I've got a brain on that. What high school did you go to in West Virginia?
Yeah, so I went to Martinsburg High School. It was only one of 2 high schools in the county at the time. West Virginia is it's one of the least populated states. It's a fairly rural.
This is brought to you by Africana Art.
United States.
What's interesting though is Martinsburg, because of where it's located, right? In some ways, almost have a different cultural feel than the rest of West Virginia. At the time, though, in the 1990s, when I went to high school there and everything, it was still pretty rural.
How many blacks went to your high school? I'll talk about that experience. Again, the people gotta get to know you, man. Talk about
so West Virginia. Yeah, West Virginia is 97% white, right? Martinsburg, because of where it's located in the panhandle between Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania, it's a little bit more culturally diverse than the rest of the state, but it's still, it's still West Virginia. I mean, it's still West Virginia. I think Martinsburg is probably about 15% non-white, which is radically different than the rest of the state. But yeah, growing up there, it was a good place to grow up, right? Like it was fairly safe. The schools were great. Got access to really good opportunities there.
How was your relationships with your classmates? I'm not talking about all of that. We understand when you go to a accredited, good school or what have you. I'm talking about you growing up as a Black man in a white world, and how that really affects you or had affected you, the good and the bad, and as they say, the ugly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so moving to the United States to immigrant parents, my parents were just really keen on shielding us from the American experience, right? In a lot of ways, like, my father was, really focused on ensuring that we maintain our cultural ties to Jamaica. In a lot of ways, he tried to shield us from the realities of what it meant to be in the local community. And so, yeah, intentionally.
Excuse me, I'm cutting you off again. For your parents, basically you saying migrant workers had a damn brain to say, I don't want my kids ingesting this. That's the only point I'm making about the current parents and understanding their history and what they're letting their kids ingest on a daily basis. Keep it going.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I spent most of my early years there in Martinsburg. And, after high school, I joined the Air Force. I needed a way to pay for college. My parents simply could not afford it. And so I joined the Air Force. I went off to Texas, which many folks regard as like the gateway to the Air Force. I was in San Antonio, Texas for training. I was 18 at the time, just fresh out of high school. I became a medic.
ROTC?
I was in ROTC. Yes, I was in ROTC.
Well, the people need to know that. Did you have any honors coming out of high school?
Yeah, I mean,
Run it down.
Yeah, so part of like growing up in Jamaica is having an intentional emphasis on mathematics and science. It's a fairly poor country, but they put like a lot of emphasis on.
You brought this subject up. Talk about that Jamaica with math and what have you, the ethos, the mindset. How did you even know that was their mindset?
Yeah, well, so growing up, there was just a real expectation. There was a real strong expectation that you would have a solid grounding in mathematics. I mean, that's required for everyone, right? And also in like reading comprehension, which, we now know is so critical to success, irrespective of career choice. And then also a solid grounding in science. And even though it was what was regarded, what we would look at now, looking into Jamaica from the United States, it would be regarded as a under-resourced school is what we would call it. But at the time, the environment was incredibly supportive. Teachers were members of the community. They lived just down the street from you. They went to the same church.
Got the same respect as a doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, teachers were highly regarded. Folks like nurses were highly regarded as like senior professionals in the community, to whom, as a young person, you were expected to show a tremendous amount of respect. And so that experience for me was really formative, right? And coming to the United States from that experience gave me the idea that, I felt incredibly lucky. I certainly was not the smartest. I wasn't the smartest person in my community. There were lots of folks who were way smarter than me. But I, through the sacrifices of my parents, my father in this case, got the opportunity to come to the United States. And the expectation is that you're going to make it count, right? The expectation is that you are going to basically make something of this opportunity. knowing that there's so many other folks who are way smarter, far more talented, who would not get this opportunity that you get. And so for me, that is something that has stayed with me my entire life. Certainly, like, you know, I'm fast forwarding a little bit intentionally, but in high school and in college, when I was in the military, I was always just mindful of just this idea that I have to make this opportunity count, because there's so many other folks who are so much more deserving who will not get this opportunity. And so, not to go too fast through the story here, brother, but yeah, as I said, I joined the Air Force after high school.
How much, before you, because you were saying taking the opportunity, how much weighed on your mind the sacrifice that your dad made?
Yeah, I think it was
his life and what he expected. You know, me being, do you have kids?
Not yet.
All right, me being a dad, when you become a parent, you have these expectations of your kids, but your kids are just like you. They have their own mind. And you know, how much did that weigh on you? What or did he even put that type of weight on you, that type of talk, what he expected you to do and all of that? Talk to our audience.
I would say yes and yes. I would say yes and yes. And I was also old enough at the time to know and recognize how difficult it was for my father to actually move us from Jamaica to the United States. I mean, our immigration system is very difficult. It's incredibly expensive. There are what are called like means tests, meaning that they ensure that you're able to support these kids all the way through, you know, through adulthood. So you're not going to have to depend on the state at all, right? And so you have to have enough cash reserves and things like that in order to actually move somebody from another country. And so I was always just mindful of the immense sacrifice that was. Right. I was also mindful of the all the folks that I went to school with in primary school or elementary school.
What did you tell me? What did you learn? Do you remember any of those teachers' names, or what did you take away from in some of the teachers? Name what you took away that helped you build your skill set, your moral code, and all of that.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating question. It's actually not a question that I often think about, right? Like often in these conversations, it's really just, it's topical, right? We're coming to talk about the election, or we're coming to talk about, you know, it's rare that I actually ever get to take a step back and actually think about some of these formative experiences. But I felt immensely lucky to grow up in the community that I did in Jamaica. It was very rural. We lived in the countryside. So this is not Kingston. This is not Ocho Rios. I grew up in St. Mary, right? Which is a farm community, a fishing community, incredibly
rural. It's much like the rural community here in the States. Just a tropical atmosphere.
Yeah, most folks I grew up with were farmers. Like
did they have running water? The parts of that community were they hooked up to the grid, running water and all of that type stuff?
No, absolutely not.
People don't know. That's why I'm trying to pull out to you, because I've been to all them places in Jamaica, and how I look at that when you start talking about that education. Because I came from a world-class track team in high school, and we went over to Jamaica, Kingston, to run against Don Quarry. This was in the 60s, and the best high school mile relays. And the United States had the best sprinters and always have. And I watched Jamaica take over that over the last 25 years. And when you said what their motto was on education, that's what hit my mind. They're conscious about what they want to excel in, and it takes time. And at first, I thought it was like a one and done with they sprinters, but it was no one and done. It was one and the next one's coming.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm looking at you.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that's absolutely right. I mean, I think it was the community I grew up in was very rural, as you noted. No, we did not have running water. It's Jamaica, so there's always like a spring close by, right? And so in many ways, there are times that we'd have to actually go and physically like fetch water from an actual spring, right?
And they see us like this, right? And don't know the trials and tribulations when they look at an outhouse, because I'm down south when I would go visit my grandmother and stuff. That's some TV stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You lived it.
Yeah, but I think it's also up to us too, though. It's up to us.
Well, that's the thing. You already proved it's up to us. Where you at? The point being that the playing field is like this, and yet we rise to this.
Yeah, and it's not by accident. I mean, it certainly is not by accident, because I'm thinking, I could think back. Obviously, we're skipping around here a bit.
That's what we do on our show, and that's what I tell people. That's the importance of owning your own media, owning your own stuff, because you do what you want. If we decide we want to talk all night, you ain't got to listen to it, but we have the ability. We don't have nobody saying, cut, edit that. I didn't like what he say. And so they can't.
But at the same time, we do hope that it's actually interesting to people who are listening. But
they can't get to know you unless we're having this conversation. You might forget something, and I say this, and that takes the conversation longer.
Yeah. So let me say this. I think, to your point, right? Like, each of us, if we're honest, will recognize that at the most critical points in our lives, right, when we were going left, somebody nudged us and said, go right. And so the question that you're asking and inviting me to go back to elementary school and to think back about those formative experiences, I think there are a number of those experiences where I was going left, right, when I should have been going right, and there were critical members of the community. So part of what happened in our very small community in Jamaica was that everybody. Like, everyone knows everybody, right? It was a farming community, it was very close knit. So you were not invisible at any place in the community. So if you were, at the market doing whatever, right? And
sounds like an HBCU experience.
Exactly. Not only is somebody gonna know, but they're actually gonna report back, right? They're actually gonna report back. And to that, here's just an example. I had no idea what it meant to have childcare until I came to the United States, because that is not something that we do. If let's say, okay, your dad, you're leaving to go to the doctor, for example, you would just ask the lady next door to keep the kids. That is our expectation.
That's your culture.
Community. Yeah. And so it wasn't, yes, we had preschools and all those things. Some of those things were in place. But as far as like an expectation that being a part of this community meant a level of responsibility to look out for each other. Now, I can tell you that, this was in the 1980s. I can tell you some of those elements still exist, but the community has gotten a lot more American than
Let me say this to you. When you say that, when you brought that up, this is what comes to my mind. Native Americans and indigenous people around the world, they don't understand this European crap. How can you own the earth? How can you own this? How can those are concepts that are foreign to your community. Child care, elderly going.
This program is brought to you by Black Star Group.
The quest to reach this would-be American dream around the globe.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that corporate America has put out there. And it's an economic, materialistic dream, which takes you away from what your culture and what normal thinking individuals, human beings, on certain things. We're caught up in this economic thing. Let's get on to that.
Yeah, and I would say to that point, Brother Nelson, to that point, I think we recognize that we actually need each other, right? I think we recognize there are forces sometimes that tell us otherwise. But like when we take a step back, we recognize that especially as Black people, especially as non-white people in this country, there is no scenario where only some of us are free, right? And I think in part, like, you know,
say that again. Say that again so that my audience can hear it about that.
Yeah, I would just say, I would just say that, there is no scenario where only some of us are free, right? It cannot be that I, because of opportunities extended to me at critical times, is able to ascend and to rise at a certain level, right? And I can't get to that place where I'm no longer aware that part of my responsibility must be to bring others with me, right? It cannot be that I basically kind of climb the ladder, pull it up and say, I'm good, everybody else, you're on your own. That is not, and I do think, I absolutely believe that when we take a step back, we recognize, especially as Black people, let's just have that conversation. We recognize that we actually need each other, right? And I think that we're gonna rise to fall.
We recognize that off camera, and I'm glad. The hell with the rest of your rise. We're getting ready to really get serious.
Mm-hmm. And you know I'm gonna push back on you on this too.
Hey, right? I don't get that's what it's about.
Because I have to remain, no, not I have to, but I actually believe. I believe in possibilities. And I actually believe, I am hopeful about the future of our people, irrespective of the 400 years of resistance and toiling that has got us to this moment. And yes, we recognize that we are not collectively where we need to be. But okay. I don't look to the future with despair, let me just tell you, right? I am actually hopeful about
we wouldn't be having this conversation. Nothing's gonna get fixed by osmosis. The first step in the 1,000-mile journey, you gotta take that first step. All right, so now you talked about all this Black man stuff. This is what I say to you on that. That Black men do not stick together to a degree.
By design. By design.
Hold it. Let me make this clear, because I get tired of people saying, oh, well, I know somebody, I know a group. I'm talking about a race. Mm-hmm. I am not talking about Blacks in Kansas City or Blacks in Jefferson City. I'm talking about Blacks in every city in this United States, Black males. If you're being truthful, we have issues, but I don't believe they're issues that we somewhat created. Mm-hmm. We have been programmed. We just don't feel every Black man in every city be feeling the same damn way for no reason. Mm-hmm. Like you said, 400 years mm-hmm. of
but division doesn't only exist in our community.
Well, right? I'm not saying but
I don't say that you're saying that. I don't say that you're saying that.
I don't care about them other communities. Yeah. Those other communities' house is not on fire. Yeah. Those other communities are not experiencing the discrimination that we're just. So I have to look at my community first. That does not mean I'm against any other community or what they're doing, because they deserve what we want also. Yeah. But it's about time for us to look after us. Yeah. Not bring LGBT community in, not to bring people with health things in, to deal with things that are affecting the Black community. And that doesn't mean that we don't have empathy or anything. Yeah. All I ask any Black person that's looking at this interview.
Yeah. So I hear this question. Let me just tell you, I hear this question about Black male unity, Black community unity through a certain lens, right? And I hear it through this kind of consistent critique that I've heard across the decades and across the generations. And
I don't even know what you hear. Why do you think you keep hearing this
Well,
consistent?
I look at it this way. I think part of it's actually design. Part of it's by design,
All
right?
right, that's all.
Part of it is that, and I saw elements of this, like, you know, reflecting back on my Jamaican community, right? And so in essence, it's a third world country. There are limited amount of jobs, unemployment's very high, but they have to give a certain amount of folks just enough to keep them invested in the system, to keep the system operating. So if you're running the local government, in some cases, you know, love my Jamaican culture, but still with rampant corruption, right? So the people at the top, post-colonial system, right?
All look like white people.
Well, all act in some of the same ways of the as the systemic oppressors that we see. So they take on some of the same behaviors.
That's in most of the Hispanic that is leftover from colonialism, and it's affecting us here right now. They're tearing the planet up.
So you've answered the question. So the critique about Black unity comes from that very idea. It comes from like a white patriarchal lens of not recognizing, of basically giving a few of us as Black people enough, right, to participate in the capitalist system, right? And feeling like we have arrived and feeling like we're basically different than our brothers and sisters who have not yet had the opportunity.
That's what they're showing you.
Except
if you behave.
Except they're not. Except they're not. Let you get stopped on the highway, you're still Black.
But that's the awakening that we're talking about with Cascade Media. We have our own sources, but if you don't know these sources are out here, then you don't go to them, and you constantly ingesting media and different things that are not speaking to your issues and waking you up. We're on the same page, as I said.
So I do think, though, we have to be clear on the critique around unity, because it's one critique, but we know that there are many, right? And I think we have to be conscious about, why do we say that about each other? Like, why do we say that about each other? Where it's by design that we're not unified, right? And the reality is, I think we need to recognize that Black people are diverse, right? But I think what we do share in this country, is, if we really dig deep, is common concern and shared aspiration for the kind of conditions that need to be met in this country that begins to extend opportunity to more of us. Now, I do know there are exceptions. And I can see that you're gonna point out the exceptions. There are some of us who get to participate in the capitalist system and get amnesia. Yes, that is true, right? But I would tell you, I would offer that majority of the Black folks in this country, right? Especially when you look at, so I looked at this article recently by the Economic Policy Institute, and they basically assessed what's the well-being of Black people from 1968 to today. Right, might have been like about a year ago, and on so many different demographics, not much has changed for the majority of Black people. Take housing, not much has changed by way of Black home ownership between 1968 and today, and so not much has changed, right? And so our concerns then, I think, remain the same. Our aspirations then, I think, remain the same.
Cut. All right. Why haven't anything changed and we have so-called Black leadership?
Well, I think part of how I understand this, it comes back to this idea that there's some of us who get close to power and actually believe that we have it. And as an organizer, I'm going to tell you that I am really clear that proximity to power is not the same as having it. Simply being in the position doesn't necessarily mean that you actually have the power to actually change the system.
Cut one more time.
I'm just going to let you pick. I'll let you pick it up from there, bro.
No, I'm saying
This is brought to you by Willard's Book and Vinyls.
a lot of my guests are sophisticated and they talk above my audience.
Yeah.
All right. So now I'm going to give an example. You have young Black coaches that in the summertime, instead of really working in their community's interest, the first thing I'm going to go down to the Nike camp. That's a close approximation of I'm with Nike. I can say I was at this camp or that camp. They do that for 10 years. And then they find out, damn, I didn't make no money. I didn't do nothing. I helped them push their program, their budget, and 10 years of my life is gone.
Yeah.
And because I wanted to be close to something that I couldn't make no decisions and no nothing, I took the snapshot with the big cheese. Everybody seen me with the president or the major athlete or whatever, but how much money did it put in my pocket?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that level of awakening is possible for all of us, right? And I remember the moment of my own personal awakening. You know, I was in Chicago and I was just basically waiting on a flight back to Kansas City. And so I was just reading the newspaper and I was reading this article of Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was questioning the Attorney General at his confirmation hearing. Attorney General was Jeff Sessions, former senator from Alabama. And basically in that conversation, the Senate Majority Leader and the senator from South Carolina basically told her to sit down and shut up, right? Basically told her to yield, to sit down, to be quiet, to step back, to yield. Don't be so rough on him, right? Because I think folks know that Kamala Harris, as a prosecutor, she goes after it, right? She's made a few people cry in that chair. And in that moment, you know, I just became like really anxious in ways that almost felt irrational for me. And in some ways, I was almost having like an anxiety attack about it, right? Like, to me, it felt irrational.
Like the elections.
Yeah. And taking a step back, here is just one of a few female senators from the largest state in the nation. California is the 7th largest economy in the world. So California has an economy that's larger than most other countries around the world. She is a duly elected senator. The person who's telling her to sit down and shut up, she actually got more votes than all those people combined, because she comes from a large state. Here it is that it wasn't easy for her to get there, right? She's been elected. She's been elected by a whole bunch of people. She's in this position. But still, these folks are going to remind her that she does not belong, right? They're going to remind her that she does not belong. And I think in that moment for me, what made me so anxious was that it didn't matter that I got a Ph.D. It didn't matter that I served in the military. It didn't matter that in any moment of my life where someone similar to that is going to remind me of my place in this society, right? And I think when we think about the things that divide us, right? It's possible for us to get to title, to be in elected office, to do all that, but you're still Black. You're still Black. And at any moment in this country, any person, usually a non-Black person, is going to remind you of that. Is going to remind you of that. And, you know, I think in part, like for me, why that was a moment of radicalization and awakening is that I have to actually move with a consistent understanding of what that means, right? And I think in part, like I also just reflected of all the times I was in some rooms, very similar to the coaches you were talking about, where I was just happy to be in the room, right? In a lot of ways, you know, I basically showed up as a one-man diversity band and helped those folks feel like the spaces that they invited me in was diverse. I basically gave them the stamp of approval. They got one non-white face in the room, and all of a sudden they get to say there's diverse. And in a lot of those rooms, I had no voice. I had no voice. But from that experience, I basically made a personal commitment to myself that don't invite me anywhere where you don't want to hear what I have to say. And from that experience, I became imminently clear that being close to power is not the same thing as having it. Being close to power, getting invited in those rooms, being, you know, taking photos with supposedly powerful people, right, is not the same thing as having that power, right? So proximity to power is not the same thing as having it.
One more time. With that being said, do you think Black people are more prone to feeling that and trying to be close to power without any substantial results?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, if we think about how long it's been for some of us to to rise, right, to get to positions that we would define as prominent, it has not been easy. It has not been easy. It's been hard fought. It's been tremendous sacrifices that we've made, right? It's been tremendous personal and professional compromises that we've made to get there. And so I can understand that. I can understand that folks feeling like, hey, I finally arrived. I can rest a little bit, right? But I think for me personally though, right? When I take a step back, I have to be clear that the things that are going to be professionally and personally rewarding to me is not simply getting another title. It's not getting a certain house in a certain part of the city, right? That is not going to be personally rewarding to me. I actually feel a personal commitment to the community that gave me this opportunity, to my family who gave me this opportunity, right? And I actually feel like that my personal call at this point is to ensure that I'm working to ensure that other folks have that opportunity as well.
Cut one more time. Now, what I want you to discuss,
Yes.
because I'm not going to interrupt you except for a subject. How to, I think you told me you were about 40 in your 40s.
43.
How do your contemporaries see some of the issues that we're discussing? And, I talked to you about just that one black issue. Everybody, just run some things down. I'm not going to interrupt you.
Yeah, I mean, I think in part, we're actually in the middle of a political season. I know we're not avoiding politics, but we're not necessarily talking about politics as well. But I think we could start there, right? I think in part, it's been rough. I mean, it's been rough for some of us. It has been rough for some of us. Like, especially when we look at the number of folks who are now unemployed due to COVID. What we know when we look at the millions of folks who've been released from jobs, a majority of those folks were Black folks, right? We were the first to be fired. And now as the economy, some places are slowly, gradually opening up, figuring out how to work in virtual formations, we're the last to be rehired. So some of my contemporaries are unemployed. Some of my contemporaries are out looking for jobs, right?
Well, what are they political and aspirate? That's what I'm saying. How are they not just looking at the economy? What are they feelings? I'm saying, do you go out for drinks? When I was that age, I went out for drinks with different eclectic.
Yeah.
What kind of conversations are y'all having? Are they, hey, she got a big butt? Or are y'all having your age group?
Yeah. I would say that the folks in my age group now are
black. Let me
that are black. I got you. I don't need to. I got you. Right. The folks in my age group are really interested in finding our place where we can make the most significant contribution on our community, our state, and the world, right? That's where most of us are. And for us, it looks like many different ways. There are some folks who are in the clergy. There are some folks who are teachers, but wherever it is, I think we're at that critical age, right? Where we are really interested in looking at what difference will we make in the world, or in wherever we are in the world.
You think your age group feels that they can come together even though that they have differences better than this older generation?
I feel like we recognize we have to. Now, that is actually not denying just some of the common differences that separate people. But I do think the kind of leadership and the kind of invitation that we need at this point is not to kind of glaze over differences, because differences are always going to be there between people. But I do think if we take a step back and we say, collectively as Black people, what does this moment require of us, right? If we do an analysis and say, is it possible for you, brother, to make it without bringing some folks with you? I think most of us would say no, right? Most of us would say no. And then the question then is, what do we do about it collectively? And I think that is actually where we are in the conversation, right? It cannot be. I think we're actually at the place where we need to begin to look at how do we repair? How do we begin to repair and rebuild some of the deep systemic and structural harms that we know have been done to Black people, right? And I think in part, like the kind of disgust and impatience that you see on the part of like rank and file Black people across Kansas City is because there's a sense of urgency that we need to be using every opportunity that we have to begin to actually improve the conditions and outlook for Black people. So here in Kansas City, I've been really startled by by this. We didn't kind of get into this part of my background, but I spent a lot of time like working in and around public health. For a while there, I was chair of the Kansas City Health Commission. And in that role, I spent a lot of time looking at the health outcomes, the life course of Black folks in Kansas City. And in a number of zip codes, right, a number of key parts of Kansas City, primarily, no surprise y'all, on the east side, there is sometimes like a 15-year difference in life expectancy between communities there, just a few blocks east of Truce, and those not even far west to Maine, right?
I've got studies, man. I've got studies that this city, see, having Black media like I do, as when I bring the politicians on and different people, their own people in their offices, they contact me and say, this is what's going on. This is, I have studies that they have spent close to $300,000-400,000, maybe $500,000 on studying the Kansas City and health, economy, everything was in our community, 64127, 64128, 64129, 64130, all in the Black community. Right. All these things are going. And the studies say that how they're doing things, they're delegating from the top down when they should be listening to what the people say their needs are, and working towards that. But that's in an ideal society. That's not happening, and that is why.
But I do think though we have to start there. I do.
Yeah, right. Well, hold it. That's
I think
how I got in contact with you.
Yeah,
an organizer.
I do think
the problem is systemically, and then try to come together and use our togetherness, our economic power, our voting power to change whatever systemically is broke in the system. And you can, to me, you cannot change that when you have leadership that don't have the same values as you do.
Yeah.
And our leadership, overall, myself, humanity has been corrupted to reach for this materialistic capitalism. That I'm saying is spread all over they own all of the media, and when you think that you're not being influenced, you're kidding yourself. And what I say to all the people who I use this all the time, my grandmother go in the house, got Martin Luther King's picture, got the white Jesus Christ, and got John F. Kennedy. All three of them and most of the people of my age group that was older than me, I'm 69, when I would go into their houses and what have you, that's who was on the wall. And if people knew who that white Jesus was modeled after, they would be horrified.
Yeah.
And so that's the power of media. And so when you're not understanding that, it has a whole world believing things that is a falsehood. And when you have your own Black media that's giving you the straight up and you're not using it, you can't tell me you for Black people.
Yeah, and I think to that point, like, I mean, I think that's a fascinating point. And I can tell you, there are times when we can look at the magnitude of this problem, right? And think that, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. But I think here in Kansas City, we know that I think we have to start from a place of awareness, of a place of concern. And if that gets us to anger, if that gets us to discuss, so be it. right? But I do think this city is not sustainable with this level of disparity that we've seen that stretches back over generations, right? The folks who were poor in Kansas City in 1968, their grandkids and great-grandkids are poor today. And it cannot be that we simply put that out there just to have a conversation about, right? It must be, though, about how do we use access to the opportunities and the power that we have right now, not to, not to be dissuaded that we're going to solve this issue all in a single mayoral term or gubernatorial term. But I do think, though, we have to actually take steps. We have to begin to take material steps towards addressing this. And, in part, it was policies that got us here. It was policies that got us here. It was redlining and blockbusting, right? And racial gerrymandering, right? It was policies that got us to this place. And so we can actually reverse engineer ourselves, reverse engineer those policies, right? To begin to actually change some of these structures.
We can, but you cannot do that under the current leadership. Or do you believe you can? That's the hard question. The honest question.
Yeah, but I actually think I think we have to use every opportunity that we have. So certainly, it can't be that we say, okay, well, we're gonna have to wait 3 more years when we get a different mayor or whatever, or a different council to take these issues on. I do think we have to use, because there are gonna be some folks, brother, that's not gonna make it 4 years from now. There are gonna be some folks that have some issues that need to be addressed where they're not gonna be around 4 more years.
Right. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying in general. All the young people that I've talked to that's your age, they're saying the current leadership just is not going to do. Not that you throw everybody out. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's like burning.
But let me ask you this question. Let me cut you there. Look, I'm cutting you. I'm doing the cut. I'm taking over the interview, brother, and cutting you.
Go, boy.
No, and I think, though, while obviously it was a very vigorous debate in Kansas City for around the mayoral race, right? We're on the council race. It was vigorous. It was vigorous. I think so. I mean, I was pretty active. What's that?
I don't study it that deep. I bring people on, ask them what they doing for the lower people, the Black people. I ain't interested in what you're doing for anybody else. Yeah. I'm not against you, but
no, but what I'm saying, though, it was a tough race. I mean, it was a pretty tough race for the council and mayorship. There was a very competitive. Not all the seats were competitive, but some of them were. And irrespective of that, here we are. You know what I'm saying? This is the leadership we have now, and we basically have to use this opportunity to look at how we begin to kind of bend the curve. It can't be that we say, okay, well, yeah, we're just gonna wait it out until next time, and then we're gonna start to address these issues, which you're not saying that, I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, I know, I'm saying that. Busy Monday morning.
So what does that look like, right? I think a starting place is that we don't need another study examining the causes of poverty and violence in Kansas City. I bow to you, bro.
Your Ph.D. and everything else done finally told you, hey, no more studies. We got enough.
Yeah, we don't need another study.
What do we need?
Well, I think we need, and I know this may not sound sufficiently concrete, right? But there are a number of folks who have not sufficiently understood or even acknowledged the disparities that exist. I think in some ways they look at people who are poor and believe that we're poor because we lack ambition, because we lack drive, right? And some of these folks are individuals who are sitting in these seats. Some of these folks are part of the kind of majority who would need to actually move policies to respond to the needs of these folks. So we have to start there. We have to start there and actually shifting the awareness and understanding that the folks who live in these zip codes aren't simply living there and are poor because of solely issues of our own.
But we already know that, and that's been discussed.
Not everybody knows that, though. Not everybody knows that. I think some of us know that. Some of us know that, but everybody knows that. But I think that's a starting place.
Hey, everybody, I'm 69. I keep bringing that up. for 50 years, if you ain't figured all of this out, there's something wrong with you. The only thing that we need to be doing is coming together. As I told you, we're gonna get a app. If you black, that's the only qualification. You can be a Republican.
I hear you. I hear you.
And once we get that done, then I'm not interested in trying to change their mind. I'm interested in trying to say, I got 100,000 black people and we're not buying your product. I bet you understand then.
Yeah, I think that's in part, but I think that's important, right? Like we do have.
Yeah, that's the only thing important. If you don't deal with America and the currency that they use, and they use "In God We Trust" on that dollar bill, that's the only thing they listen to.
Yeah, so I agree with you. We do need to build black political power in Kansas City. Absolutely, I'm there with you.
Economic power. The hell with all that.
But I think it's both. I think it goes hand in hand. I think it goes hand in hand.
But I bet you the businessmen that's putting the bill, that's economic power. That political power comes from economic power. That's why corporate America owns the world, because they bought everybody, because they have the economics. And soon as black people understand, you get respect on how much you are worth.
Yeah. So in the remaining time that we have left, let me just say that I'm gonna give a plug. I'm gonna give a plug for acknowledging the disparities that exist in Kansas City. Certainly, we could say that everybody knows it, but if they know it, why have not been any action today? All right, so I'm gonna start there, and I'm gonna just, we got to kind of trace through it here. And I do think we have to have expectations from the political leaders at the state level and at our very local city level to actually have a solid understanding of this and actually come with a commitment to using whatever power they have. And they do have some, right? They do have some. We've seen, for example, that the significant amount of economic benefits in Kansas City is consolidated in just a few blocks downtown, right? Or in some of the very same places across the city. The same places that have always gotten access to economic opportunities
plazas
are the same places that they get, right? And so in essence, I think we have to actually demand a different economic realignment, a different level of concern. The folks who most need government to be responsive in this city are the folks that we're talking about in these low life expectancy communities, right? And those are the folks who are least likely to see those in political leadership first understand their issues, and two, are prepared to actually even move to address them.
Do you feel like city council people working together on Black issues?
Yeah, I would say that from a starting place, the most significant thing that these folks can do is to look at addressing economics. Much of the differences that we see in life expectancy comes from economic disparities, right? And we know that we don't need to reinvent the wheel and fire. There are policies that are being tested in other cities, smaller, about the same size as Kansas City, that are making a difference. That are being moved by other Black mayors, other mostly Black city councils across the country are actually moving creative policies to address their issues. Like, I was somewhat disappointed when I saw like the COVID relief that this council put together. I think it was like, $500,000, and it wasn't actually even going to the people who most needed it, right? And so, I mean, I know that we don't have unlimited dollars, but when we look at, and you don't need any advanced degree to understand this. When you look at for whom the system is responsive, it is not the folks that live in these low life expectancy communities, right? It's the folks who are proximate to the folks who occupy these positions of political power. So I think that has to be a shift. That has to be a shift of what we begin to see.
But I don't think that shifts unless we come together and flex economic might.
Well, I think we have to build it. I do not think we have sufficient Black political power to do it. I don't think it's sufficiently organized.
Political power. I stated that to you.
Well, I'm saying political power.
100,000 broke Black people, and they all are on the same page, you are the power. And when you say we're not going to shop there or we're not going to support this, that's the only thing America respects, not just Kansas City.
But I think that's one form of power, and I think it's an important form. But I don't think it's the only form. I don't think it's the only form of power that we can use. Certainly, as Black people, even as Black poor people, we still have significant economic power, right? Where if redirected and moved in concert with each other, yes, we can have impact.
What do you think I'm talking about? I'm not just talking about boycotting. I'm talking about redirecting our economic power to flex our political might.
But while I think that's important, Brother Nelson, I also think that we can't ignore political power. I don't think we can ignore that because the two are actually connected.
You can't ignore. I don't know one politician can't be bored. The hell are you talking about? Not one.
So we agree.
So when you start talking about can't ignore the people that's running this country, they don't give a damn about a politician or a president.
Okay, so when I say
his marching orders, what the major corporations that's running this world say you to do. Don't do it, you won't be here.
Yeah. So I think we're in agreement.
All right.
So
Well,
let's piece it together. So we need, as Black people, to look at like how do we actually move and recognize our economic power.
And then I want to cut you again.
All
the white people that I know.
Yes.
When Bush got in office, I didn't vote for him. Second term, didn't nobody vote for him. You talk to these people about Trump. None of my white friends voted for him.
Quite a bit voted for him.
Yeah, there we go. So I'm not trying to hear no more words about nothing except for Black economic power. If we are economically sufficient, I don't expect you to agree with me on everything for sure.
No. The only thing I'm saying to you is that Black economic aspiration and Black economic power is connected to Black political power. The two are connected.
It should be.
Yeah.
Now I'll tell you this. Back, what's the name just died that started the Black Enterprise magazine? He died about 2 months ago. Mm-hmm. And when Roland Martin, I'll say this, it's like BT, when it came on, MTV was the major player. Mm-hmm. MTV came.
You gotta remember, I'm a kid from the 90s, so yeah, I remember.
All right, yeah. Kicked MTV's butt because they start doing it the way we do it. Black people. That's what hip hop is. We're creative. Mm-hmm. And do you know at that same time when they sold BET for $3.3 billion to Johnson and his wife, MTV was getting $8,000 for the same commercial as BET was getting $1,600 for. Mm. And that is the disparity, even on that level, mm-hmm. that we deal with. And when you, they own everything. And the only way you can fight that is with economics. And Black people, you talked about California's the 7th largest country, all of that. Black people, if we got our economics on one track, we'd be one of the largest economies in the world. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm going. Yeah, all that other stuff don't work for me. I've been convinced now that I really understand Black nationalism, that's the only thing. All that other stuff is some cream puff stuff, Oreo stuff. I'm black on the outside, but I'm white on the inside. And it's not about color really, because I tell people quick, all history started in Africa and all mankind came out of Africa. And I don't care what color you are, you African.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I'm with you there on Black economic power, right? But I would come back to it and just say that it is connected to Black people also building political power. And I do think our goal is about the liberation of Black people.
I just be giving you a hard time.
Oh no, I hear you, right? And I think what we have to do is to look at every lever that gets us to that place. What we want, where we want to get to as a place where Black people, where we're able to live with dignity, where we're able to go to the doctor when we get sick, right? Where we're able to, be able to take a vacation now and again. We're not asking for the world, right?
And well, I'm with you on that. And let me say, because I feel one way does not mean that your way doesn't work.
Right? I'm
saying that to the audience. That there's people that me and you got different ways. They looking at this. I'm different from them. But all we both are saying, I think we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
We're all in the same.
And I think where there's a little bit of a difference is how do we get there?
Right.
I just think given where we are, 400 years of struggle and resistance, right? Recognizing that, 50 years ago, many of us are in the same place or worse off than where we were then. And I think with that, to me, it then takes an all the above consideration of all the other possible pathways, whether it be economic power, political power, social influence, whatever it takes. We need like an all the above approach to actually change the outlook for Black people, because we got some time that we need to make up in accelerating the conditions in the moment where we get to the place where we can thrive.
Tell me this, what are your closing statements? What do you have to say to young Black high school kids and our college kids?
Well, I think, and it's not much of a closing statement, but it's really more of like a personal reflection of where we are in the, right? Like, I think like many of us, maybe in some ways, like was probably glued to our television in some ways over the last several days, like waiting for the outcome of the election, right? And I know some of us as Black people, had different positions and opinions about Kamala Harris and the like, and Joe Biden and Trump and the whole operation. But I do think in some ways, like our pathway and aspirations of Black people is actually tied up in part in that process and the outcome, right?
Yeah.
I am mindful and reflective on the political brilliance of Black women, Black men too, but Black women in South Carolina, where back in February, they had the foresight basically to
cut you off one time again. We come from Black women, strong Black women.
Yes.
Have been there so that I could be born. Mm-hmm. They suffered rape and everything else. And so, I'm in that corner straight out.
Yeah. But just to that, just reflecting on just the role of Black women in our political process. And I know you got an opinion, brother, about the political process, but just reflecting on the role that Black women have played in saving our democracy time after time. Black women are the single most reliable voters of every single group. Roughly 90% of Black women, probably like 95% of Black women voted for the ticket that won. Not because we're misguided, right? There are folks who look at that and say, okay, well, yeah, they were just lemmings, we're just moving along. No, right? I think it's a recognition that some of these things take time, right? And it's taken too long for us, right? Especially Black women of every single group have the biggest excuse to sit at home and not participate because they have not seen where their participation has actually improved their economic outlook, right? Black women are some of the lowest paid group of people across the board. They're paid significantly lower than even white women in this case, lower than Asian women, right? But Black women still participate. And I think that actually gives me some hope, not a blind hope. It's not a misguided hope, right? But it's basically a recognition that here we are yet again in this moment, and we need to make this moment count for something. The folks that I'm talking to feel a certain urgency, a certain impatience. You asked me the question earlier, like, what do we talk about when we go out as young professionals, right? You know, we're mindful that it matters that we're Black in this moment. That means something, right? We understand instinctively what that means. We're not misguided that you get a certain degree, you get a certain job, you live in a certain zip code, you're still Black in this country, and that still matters. But we have not actually turned our backs on democracy as Black people. In essence, we have been the saviors of it, even at these critical moments. And, you know, I'm going to stop talking here in a minute, but I'm just kind of mindful of the opportunity that we have. The system is not going to change itself. It's going to be up to us. And, you know, we have not, as Black people, turned our backs on the system, but I think it's actually at this time that we actually need to demand with greater seriousness.
I think the system has turned its back on us.
Yeah, but I do think we have the opportunity to look at how do we actually shift to a culture of repairing the harm to Black people and the Black community.
Shift the paradigm, you mean?
Exactly. So,
I'm telling you right off the top, you have a political hat on most of this program because what I believe in what you say. Yes. I believe that my way is not necessarily the only way. Yes. And for me to say you old people get out the way, that means me too. Accepting what your viewpoint is, it's getting ready to be your world, and I ain't got my hat on, but I'm taking my hat off to you, and I want you to understand that, and I want my audience to understand. I am go in so hard because I believe in what I say. So.
I can hang with you on it, brother. I can hang with you. Just one thing to point out, though. There's a generation after me, right? There's a generation that is like in their 20s. And those are the folks who are so fearless and so courageous.
But they're connected to you, though. I'm saying
in some ways, but those folks.
No, you understand. They are. I'm telling you, because you understand. These old people don't understand. That you're not connected like, hey, I'm going to go party with them, or I'm going to do. But you're connected to the reality that the older generation, we're not asking you to get out the total picture. We're asking you to take an emeritus position. And I'm saying that I think that those young people that you're talking about, no, they're not in your league, but they're not so far, you're not so far out of touch with what their aspirations are.
But they're more fearless than I am. They're more fearless. I mean, I'm going to tell you, they're more fearless than I am.
You know why?
I absolutely know why. I mean, they bring a certain drive and a certain hunger that actually gives me hope.
All right, let me tell you why, in my estimation again. All right, who do you send to war?
Well, I can tell you that. I was in the military, so I know.
Old daughter.
It's usually the young kids.
Right, because they don't know nothing, and they say, you go up into that cave, find out what's up in that cave. I'm the fox. I'm on the outside, because you're fearless. Mm-hmm. And didn't I say the tip of the spear are you young people? Mm-hmm. I'm saying, what do the generals do? They old and they give advice to the command structure as it goes down. But it ain't no, I'm scared to go in there. And where I see our community, we have to be the same way. We have to support our young people, our young teenagers, our adults, and we have to support people in your position, in your age group. And we don't have to agree with you all the time.
Well, I think it's helpful that we don't agree all the time, right? So to that point, we don't agree all the time. The idea that we're going to have this kind of false unity is misguided, right? That should not be what we seek. It should be that we seek a common understanding for the struggle that we're facing in this country as Black people. It matters that we're Black in this country, right? And I think rather than going down this road around unity, which it's not insignificant, but it's not the most important thing. I think what we need to center on is what's our common aspiration as Black people? Because I think at the end of the day, that is going to be the common ingredient that sets up where we're able to come together.
I don't think Black people have no different aspirations than any American with what America is supposed to be about. From my point of view, as I say, I'm a nationalist, but one thing I say, it's a dichotomy. I'm an American, and I run that damn flag up so quick because my people built this country, and I'm not gonna let nobody tell me that I don't belong or anything of that nature.
Yeah.
And I want to express that to my kinfolk. Don't let nobody. They might be economically empowered, but once you learn and get educated, they can't take that away, and you can pass that on to reach the goals that you want to reach. Because unless they kill your seed, and that's what they try to do. That's what I was thinking when you were saying your story. See, we lived through our seed, and your dad said, "Hey, I'm doing this, but he's proud as hell of you. You know it, I know it. Whole family's proud of you." And so that's what they'll try to kill. But your generation now is saying, we walked this way a long time. We're not discounting it, but I think we should try something new.
Yeah. And I think with that, to me, that feels like a good place to not end the conversation, but just to pause the conversation here and then continue it.
I like that, because I told you I want to have you on, and I want you to host some of shows where you bring in some of your peers on, and you're running it down. Sometime with your political hat, but I really I want you to have
They're connected, brother. The political, the social, the cultural.
I want you to have your Black Power hat on when you
They're connected. They're definitely connected.
All right. Hold it. We're gonna see. And as I say always in closing, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
Program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.